All right, welcome everybody. This is the fifth meeting of the Local Planning Committee for the Potsdam DRI. We are very pleased to be back together once again. For those members of the public, welcome via YouTube. We're glad you can join us. We have with us a full LPC, and before we go much further, I'm going to ask Sarah to do a roll call of those of us that are in attendance.
Sure. So we're going to start with our local planning committee. I'm just going to read your name on the list, and if you just want to unmute yourself briefly to let us know that you're here. Starting with Mayor Ron Tischler.
Here.
Okay. Kristen Esterberg.
I'm here.
Okay. Rob Bicknell.
Here.
Allison Carney.
Here.
Cindy Believer.
Here.
Kelly Hitchman.
Present.
Maggie McKenna.
Here.
Welcome. Dwayne Pelkey.
Here.
Rose Revesi.
Here.
Okay. Lee Vandewater.
I'm here, and so is the train.
Oh boy.
Good timing.
And Eric Burke. Oh, Eric Backus.
Eric Backus is here. Yes, sorry I'm a little late.
Oh, that's okay. Welcome. So we have a few LPC members that are not in attendance, and that's Hugo Atman, Eric Burke, Ann Carville, Aaron Draper, and Nick Sheehan. Okay, moving on to our state agency staff. Barbara Kendall.
Here.
Welcome. Leslie.
Here.
Steve Hunt.
Here.
Okay. And Mary Bartholomew and Buck Bobbin and Seth Belt will not be able to join us this evening. Now moving on to the village. Fred Hans.
Here.
Okay. Patrick Kelly.
Here.
Okay. Jason from the county will not be able to join us this evening. And Greg Thompson is also not joining us this evening. Okay, and now for the consulting team. On the MJ side, we have myself, Sarah Stark, Jackie Hakes, as well as Andrew Gilchrist. From EDR, Jane Rice.
Here.
And Erica Tazer.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. And then from CLA site, we have Peter Loyola.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Peter. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. At this point, I would like to turn it over to your co-chairs. Mayor, if you would like to take it from here for the welcome.
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending again this evening. I haven't seen you in about a week, most of you. I'm sorry you can't see my pretty face, but I'm having some technical glitches on my computer, so I'm on the phone. I would like to say, we're moving forward. I would like to say thank you to our engineering firm, our consultants, our partners in Albany, New York State, and anyone else involved. And it's getting to be more and more exciting that we can see, hopefully, the light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be a while. It won't happen today or tomorrow, but it will happen. And I just couldn't be more pleased with the outcome, with the response from all you folks, and with the assistance of our partners in Albany. Thank you.
And if I could also express my deep appreciation for all the members of the LPC and our wonderful partners, our consultants, our state agencies. Well, we're so grateful to see this process move forward. And I have to say, this is truly exciting. We've got, I think, a very momentous and important task ahead of us tonight. And I'm really thrilled that we are finally reaching the point where we can make the final decisions on the projects and really moving forward. So I am very much looking forward to the conversation tonight and grateful for all of you for participating with us. And so back to you, Jackie, and thank you for your wonderful facilitation and keeping us on track.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Kristen. We are very excited to be able to be here with you today, and I am going to switch to our presentation, and we will jump right into this. I did. Okay. All right, so can everybody see this screen? Thumbs up, head nods, wonderful. All right.
Yes.
So I just want to briefly walk through the agenda for today in terms of expectations of what we're hoping to achieve today. The purpose of today's LPC meeting is to really provide an overview of the projects that are currently on the list for consideration for DRI funding. This list is where we left off together back in March at our last LPC meeting when we were discussing these projects. So we will go through each project individually, provide kind of an overview of the project as a reminder to all of us of what the project is, what the DRI request is. And then after that, we're really going to be turning it over to you as the LPC to be discussing which projects should be included on a slate of projects recommended for DRI funding. And that is where we're really hoping to be at the end of the session with you today. That list, that slate of projects will then go out to the public for public input, and we will talk through how that engagement will work. And then we'll come back together, hopefully in September, and there will be a vote by this group on that final slate of projects to recommend for DRI funding. All right. So I do need to, if you'll recall at the beginning of each of our LPC meetings, we do need to talk through the conflict of interest. This is a reminder of a conflict of interest for the purposes of the code of conduct, which each of you have signed and completed at the beginning of your role in the DRI. A conflict of interest is may occur when any personal interest, financial or otherwise, of a member of this local planning committee has the potential to interfere or have the appearance of interfering with a member's independent advice. And so what we would request of the LPC is that you disclose any potential conflict of interest at the earliest possible time so that we can have that documented. And what that means, and this will be important particularly for the next LPC meeting, is that you would be asked to recuse yourself from voting on and making a decision on any project that you have identified as a conflict, that you have a conflict of interest. And so we have gone through earlier on in this process, and each LPC member did identify potential conflicts of interest. There is, I think, a new conflict of interest for a specific project, and we will ask that to be disclosed at the time of our discussion this evening of that project. So that covers the conflict of interest disclosure and recusal, and I would ask if there are any questions on that at this point in time. Okay. Hearing none, let's go into the project schedule. So if you'll recall, we began this effort together back in December of 2019. We were on a fast track, and thanks to all the hard work of this group and our state partners as well, we were right on target, right on schedule. Obviously, that momentum was paused in March, as was the momentum of most anything that was going on in our world at that point in time. So we are very pleased, here we are in August, to be re-engaging with you, re-engaging with this effort and the community, and we are back on the fast track. So this month of August, we are reaching back out to you as a local planning committee. We do have a series of public engagement activities scheduled. And then next month in September, we would be asking the LPC to vote on a final slate of projects. Our consultant team will be finalizing your strategic investment plan for submission to the state. We would be working with the state on finalizing and editing that document on your behalf. In terms of what is to come, we do have a series of engagement activities that have been identified. I will go into detail about each of those because they are important. And then, as I had mentioned, we have tentatively scheduled LPC meeting number 6, which we anticipate to be the final meeting for Wednesday, September 9th. And at that meeting, we anticipate a vote on the final slate of projects recommended for DRI. All right, just a quick reminder for all of us of all of the work that had been done leading up to March for this effort, particularly with regard to engagement activities. You'll recall we had our first public open house back in January, very well attended. We hosted an online community survey. Again, very, very wonderful response rate with that survey in January and February. We held the second public open house where we introduced the specific projects that you are discussing now to the public. That was in early March. We also, our team members went out into the community to have pop-up tables at Clarkson University and SUNY Potsdam. We went into the middle school and had a really fun interactive engagement with the middle schoolers in March, and we also conducted an online student survey. What is coming up is a series of engagement activities across multiple platforms. We wanted to provide a variety of opportunities for the public to be able to engage, recognizing that engagement needs to take on a new approach and a new look given the COVID-19 world that we find ourselves in today. So what we have for an engagement activities to start with is what we're calling an online project gallery. This is an ArcGIS based story map. So it is essentially a virtual tour that will walk people through the downtown and explain each of the proposed projects that comes out of our discussion with you this evening, and some details about the projects. And it's a really great way to graphically illustrate how the projects are connected within your downtown and to your downtown. This will be accessible through the project website, potsdamdri.com, and comments can be submitted through the project email or at a physical comment card that will be available at Village Hall. We also have an opportunity for those that might not feel as comfortable logging into the project website and touring around the story map in the project gallery. We are providing an alternative. We will be having 2 storefront gallery posters available at 2 different locations within your downtown, at Jernabe Coffee House on Maple Street and the Potsdam Chamber of Commerce on Market Street. We want to thank both of those organizations for hosting our gallery posters for the duration of time that this will be occurring. And this will be, those posters will be in the storefronts from August 28th through September 4th. So if you're walking through your downtown, we hope that you will take a look at those. More information about this is on the website. And again, comments can be provided via the project email or comment card. In addition to those opportunities for engagement for the public to learn about the projects and share input and feedback, we are hosting a live virtual Q&A session. That will be hosted on September 2nd at 6 p.m. It will be hosted through WebEx, and that does require a registration. That registration information is available on the flyers that we've shared with you, LPC members, and we hope you're sharing with your networks. It's also available on the project website at potsdamdri.com. This is going to be an opportunity for the public to ask questions of your LPC co-chairs, our state partners, as well as the consultant team. So that's another avenue for people to be able to engage and provide feedback. All right, before we go on, are there any questions? We do have our team members, Jane and Erica from EDR, who are helping us to lead this engagement, round of engagement activities. Are there any questions from the LPC with regard to the engagement?
I have a quick question. Just when we found out about the chamber having posters in the windows, what size are those posters? We just had concerns that there wasn't much space.
Okay, sure. They're 24 by 36, and we did coordinate.
Okay.
Pardon?
3.
Just
There
wanted
will
to
be
check
3
just to make sure.
posters.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, we have been working, Rob, to be able to get the font small enough to limit everything to 3 posters so that they can fit within the windows, but making sure it's large enough that it can be viewed from the street. And I think that's the key, is that this is a way for the public to have some in-person interaction and reading something while being socially distanced on the street.
Thank you.
Other questions?
If you need any other location to put posters,
Allison,
I'm
we're
happy to
having...
use my store, Allison.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Allison. We were having difficulty hearing you, but thank you for offering. Okay.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Okay. Other questions or comments about the engagement? I think what we would do is ask you as LPC members to help spread the word and let folks know that we are re-engaging in this effort, and we want to re-engage with the community. Okay. So with that, let's go right into the DRI project list. And so we're going to back up all the way to January, just as a quick refresher of how much work this group has done in the time period that you have been working on this. So we did have an initial call for projects, and there were 47 different individual projects received. And this group had reviewed all of those to determine which projects would be advancing on. That initial preliminary cost of projects totaled over $46 million. And the preliminary DRI request for that initial list of projects was just over $26 million. Fast forward to March. So in a very short period of time, this group worked very hard to identify a more refined list of projects to advance. And if you'll recall, there was that series of criteria that you evaluated each project on, things like project readiness, impact in terms of transformative impacts, the ability to be catalytic for downtown revitalization, sponsor capacity, a variety of things that this group looked at with regard to each project. And the result of the March 17th LPC meeting number 4 was a list that identified 14 projects to advance, totaling $19 million in project costs and $13.4 million in total DRI request. That project, or that discussion, also identified 2 projects that might need more information to be more fully considered. And those represented $4 million in total costs and an additional $2 million in DRI requests. All right, since we have been together in March, there have been some modifications to the projects that have been identified on that list, and we'll go into those in just a moment. The largest change is that one project sponsor has asked to be withdrawn from consideration for the DRI, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So there are now 13 projects on the list with 2 potential projects needing additional information. There has been a change in the total project cost as a result of updates and revisions to scope and refinements by project sponsors. The total project cost has increased to 19.2 million based on that list of 13. And the total DRI request is now at 13.9 million. And just as a quick reminder, if you'll recall, our state partners are asking that the Potsdam DRI identify between 12 and $16 million worth of DRI recommended projects, so that should something occur, a project advance on its own, or a project scope change, or a project not being able to move forward, you still have your full DRI program amount available and standing ready, projects standing ready to take advantage of that. All right. So this is what that looks like in terms of projects ready to advance. I'm going to quickly list these, and then we are going to, our team, between Peter, Sarah, and I, we will be walking through an overview of these. And then what we would like to do, once we have completed the overview of every project that is on the list, we're going to turn it over to you as LPC members and walk through each project and ask you to consider if it should continue to move forward and be on the slate of projects. And we'll walk through kind of how we'll do that once we get through the overview. All right, so the projects that are currently on the list ready to advance, and this is the result of your last discussion in March: the Downtown Riverwalk Trail, the Downtown Streetscape Project, the St. Lawrence Whitewater Park, the Fall Island Skate Park and Art Park, Rebuild Downtown Potsdam, that is the revolving loan and grant fund, the Downtown Branding Campaign, the North Country Children's Museum, the Potsdam Food Co-op relocation, the Sandstone, Roxy Theater alterations, improvements at 59 Market Street, upgrades to the Clarkson Inn, the North Country Arts Center. And you'll notice there is a strike through in the Market Street historic facade. That is the project that the sponsor had asked to be withdrawn from consideration for DRI. If you recall, that was that bundled group of facade improvement projects for historic buildings within the downtown along Market Street. And the project sponsor withdrew primarily given the current financial situation that he finds himself in as a result of the global pandemic. The two projects that you had identified as needing more information were the Market Square Mall improvements and the Damon Hall renovations. Okay, so that's a quick reminder of where we are. What we have been doing since we were last together in March, and we have communicated with all the project sponsors to make sure that they are willing and able to continue moving forward in the DRI process. We have been clarifying any scope changes, modifications, and budgets, and as recently as Monday have received more refined budgets, and all of that information has been uploaded to your LPC Dropbox for your viewing and evaluation. We've worked with some project sponsors to remove DRI ineligible expenses and shift that and make sure all of those things that each project sponsor is asking for the DRI are things that the DRI can in fact fund. And then we have received updated renderings and plans and models and photos from project sponsors. So project sponsors have continued to advance their efforts, even though it has been some time since we have been together. All right, so I do want to take the opportunity to just talk through with you what this looks like in terms of changes in dollars, all right? So for those projects that were in that green box I just showed you, those projects that you have identified as being ready to advance, the change in the DRI request is a total of $491,000 from what you had seen previously in March. All right, so what resulted in that was an increase of DRI requests by 4 projects, 1 project with a decrease, in the DRI request, and then the withdrawal of that one Market Street facade project. The total project cost for that is a change of $225,000. We thought it might also be helpful for you to understand what the inclusion of those two additional projects that you had identified as needing more information might be. So that's projects B24, B36, the Market Square Mall and Damon Hall. So the changes in DRI request equate into $473,000 of additional DRI request. And the changes in the total project cost with this equate into $236,000 worth of increase in total project cost. All right. I also thought it might be helpful for you all to see what the breakdown might be by DRI project category. So if you'll recall, early on we had talked about the various different DRI categories. There is the public improvement project category, the new building and rehabilitation category, the revolving loan and grant fund, and then lastly the branding and marketing category. So this is based on just those projects on the current list, correct, Sarah?
Yes.
I want to make sure.
Yep, that is correct.
All right. So we identified the DRI request and the breakdown by category for the DRI request. Again, as a reminder, this includes those 13 projects that were in that green box, a total project cost of $19.2 million, and a total DRI request at this point in time of $13.9 million. The breakdown is 59% of public improvement projects, 59% of the DRI request is for new development and rehabilitation projects, 4% is identified right now for the revolving loan and grant category, and 1% is identified for the branding and marketing. In comparison, for your knowledge, I can advance, in comparison to previous North Country DRI communities, we have shown this to you previously, but we thought that it might make sense to share this with you. I will say, while every community, every DRI community is different, there does seem to be a somewhat consistent trend with the North Country communities in terms of the category split of DRI funds. So the DRI communities in DRI 1 and DRI round 2, it was a 50% split for the public improvement projects, approximately 41% for the new development and rehabilitation, 9% for the loan and grant fund, and less than 1% for the branding and marketing. A little more recent look at DRI, oops, that went a little too quickly, DRI round 3. This was Saranac Lake, it was the North Country community. The breakdown is as follows. Public improvement projects at 50%, new development and rehabilitation projects at 45%, the revolving loan and grant fund was at 4%, and the downtown branding and marketing was at 2%. And the total DRI request for the Saranac Lake DRI was at $14.5 million. Right. So I just wanted to share this with you so you have an idea of where you are in terms of previous DRIs in the North Country. However, I do just want to point out probably the obvious. Every community is different, and I think it's important not necessarily to get caught up in the percentage of the category breakdown for your DRI request, but really looking at which projects in which grouping of projects together have the biggest impact on your downtown and are truly the most transformative. I also want to state that no other North Country DRI community or any other DRI communities in previous rounds has had to work within a global pandemic and the financial and economic uncertainty that a lot of communities are going through right now. So I just want to point that out as you're thinking about this, and as we start to work with you to identify a slate of projects at the end of our discussion today.
Nick, I have a question.
Sure.
These pie charts, do they reflect the percentages of the requests, like for round 1 and round 2 in Saranac Lake, or do they reflect what was approved after it went to the state?
Great question, Rose. These reflect the DRI recommended projects. So the request that was included in the strategic investment plan for each of these communities.
And roughly for round 1 and 2 then, since they've been granted, I mean, the states, selected their projects, do they stay close to this, or is it usually, do they go more with the new development projects? How do the percentages change a lot?
I'm not certain, quite honestly, Rose. I don't know if perhaps any of our state partners might have a better sense of that. Yeah.
I could comment on that. This is Barbara from Department of State, and generally, I would say in general, the percentages stay about the same. It's always $9.7 million because you get 10,300,000 of which goes to the consultant. So it's always 9.7 million is the cap that will be awarded. But in general, the public improvement projects pretty much go forward as they're requested. I mean, I probably, there may be a few cases where something didn't happen, but in general, that percentage, that box, the green, usually stays the same. And the new development, the revolving loan and grant is always only 600,000. So I think in general, it pretty much stays the same.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Steve, it's Steve Hunt. Do you have any other thoughts about that question?
No additional thoughts. I think that's right, Barbara.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments or questions before we move into the overview of the specific projects?
Not sure if it's worth mentioning, but, and you probably will touch on this later, but it seems like there has been a slight change due to the pandemic, where the revolving grant and loan fund could potentially be a slightly larger wedge of that pie. And it seems worth noting that at some point.
Yes, thank you, Lee. We will be talking about the potential opportunity to increase the maximum for the DRI request for the revolving loan and grant fund. And we do have some of the figures should this committee, should the LPC decide that that's something that you might want to look at. We have kind of done a variety of different scenarios of what that might be in terms of a project category breakdown. Other comments or questions? All right. So with that, we are going to move into the overview of the projects. We are going to spend just a little more time probably on the this first project, which is the Downtown Riverwalk Trail. This has been refined since you have last seen this, and we have additional renderings that our wonderful team members, CLA Site, Peter and Aaron from CLA Site, have been working with the village on. As a result of some of the refinements, and I would say a broadening of the scope, in a way that we do feel makes sense, the project cost has increased from approximately 1.7 million to what is now $2.4 million. And as a result, the total DRI request has increased. This is considered a public improvement project, and it does include construction of a looped multi-use trail along the river throughout downtown, and has included a series of additional components. And I'm just going to briefly walk through the components and then turn this over to Peter to walk through in a little more detail. We felt that it made sense, and some of this is refined since you last saw it. So the components include a pocket park at Sandstone Drive, a Sandstone Drive shared use path, a mural walk over near the Market Square Mall area, bike lanes on Maple Street, and then also the various, what I would say, soft costs associated with any sort of design like this, the mobilization contingencies, design fees, inflation, et cetera. And so that's how we've gotten to this $2.4 million DRI request. All right, so with that, Peter, I'm going to leave you on the key map if you want to take it from here, and just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slide.
Sure, thank you, Jackie. Nice to be here. And when we started this project, there were some wonderful projects that had, come to the table with regard to the Whitewater Park, Gardner Park, the Market Street Place project. And when we were looking at it, and as well as the Riverwalk Trail, and as we started diving into it and looking at it, there was clearly a need to create some more connectivity between all of these projects. I mean, obviously you have, the most unique asset to Potsdam is the Racket River and the accessibility to the river, with regard to kayaking, and the fact that the Whitewater Park is a viable project made this all more important to actually create some kind of connectivity between all these projects. And so the idea was to create a design vocabulary that provides that connectivity throughout the project, not just visually, but also physically with regard to accessibility and mobility. We took a look at, some nodes, for instance, at the Pocket Park on Sandstone and Maple. This is A. We took a look at the opportunity along Sandstone Drive to actually create a shared use path that would also connect to the existing sidewalk across the bridge. There's some limitations there, but at least create some connectivity, across the bridge, and then also include a shared use path down along the Market Street parking lot to Gardner Park. And how can we enhance that and make that work? And then obviously Gardner Park was a project that would actually provide the accessibility to the river. And then how can we connect into Gardner Park, into the downtown area with the streetscape project, which, is really ready to go. There's some amenities and some things that we can do to actually create some more interpretation, some amenities that would actually help create some connectivity and interpretation around this whole entire area. We also included, some gateways to the Riverwalk Trail, which are at Maple Street and also at Sandstone Drive, and also included Maple Street bike lanes, which would be merely some restriping and some change in a little bit of geometry of roadway just through striping. So for very, very cost-effective solution, we could actually create bike mobility throughout the whole entire project area. So we felt that this was really exciting to really refine the designs, make sure that we showed connectivity to, for instance, Munter Trail that's down below. So make use of some of the existing connections into the downtown area. So why don't we start with just the Pocket Park to begin with, Jackie, and what we did here was just take a crack at creating a memorial park and creating a focal point for the downtown area as a gateway. We included a shared use path, which made a lot of sense with regard to connectivity. There's already some existing walkways, around the perimeter of the park, but we felt to connect with a shared use path to the intersections, create some seating and gathering areas, a potential memorial area with sculpture sitting areas, and also include the bike lanes and the crosswalks. Felt that by engaging and reinventing this space, that it would really truly be a gateway to the downtown area. If you want to go to B, Jackie. The connection to Sandstone Drive and the shared use paths along Sandstone Drive, but also down and along as a connection to Gardner Park, a shared use path that would also include a mural walk. This was really important to get some connectivity to Gardner Park, another way to kind of get up into and around Sandstone Drive and into the downtown area. A very important connection we felt, and would really help kind of complete the loop to Gardner Park from this aspect, and propose a mural walk. Obviously, we're reactivating kind of a back end service area into something that's viable, complete with bioswales and green infrastructure that's eligible for additional funding these days. And engage in partnerships with the Arts Council to create a very, very vibrant space that could be reactivated into much more pedestrian friendly use and provide those connections. If you go to D, we have.
Hold on, there we go. There was a delay, Peter.
No worries. And then we wanted to make sure that we showed clear connection and clear gateway down into the Riverwalk Trail. Make sure that we had a stairway connection. I think when we originally started, there was some talk with DOT about creating a handicap ramp, accessibility ramp, on the Sandstone Drive. But because we had sidewalks and we're now proposing shared use path completely around, to Maple Street from the Sandstone Drive area, we felt that we could actually, provide a more cost-effective solution, took up less space for the stairway. We would include a bicycle track for bicycles to kind of engage in the stairway and make it down or up to the improvement to the trail, and then create a connection to the apartment complex so that there's now more walkability and other options to get to the downtown area to the north, rather than having to go around the south and up and around. So definitely engage the space a little bit more and create more connectivity, to the downtown area from Sandstone Drive. Make the improvements to the trail. That was really important, that we create some benches and open up the space a little bit along the existing pathway that's there now. But then create some connectivity to the Maple Street trailhead that would not only tie the Munter Trail and crosswalk, change a little bit of the geometry there, but create a signage area, bench area, and then connectivity on the backside of the restaurant, and help activate that space into indoor-outdoor space that would be a benefit to private development and the restaurant itself. It ties in very well to the upper and lower canoe carry trails, and we would there was a proposal to actually define the parking area a little bit better as a trailhead. So we just felt to reactivate this space, create interpretation to the trail, would add additional design vocabulary, just bring the connectivity together. Do we have one more slide?
Yeah, just the overall.
No, that's it. So, the bike lane striping was another piece along Maple Street. There's already some bike lanes. We were asking that in this ask that we just create additional striping and we change the geometry. There's plenty of room for bike lanes to be striped and painted. It would be out into the shoulders of the street, therefore making maintenance a little bit easier for plowing. That would be a dedicated, shared use striping along Maple Street. And those are the projects that I think will help create some connectivity for all the various projects, and I think would really truly make this all the projects transformative and connected.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Peter. And one of the things that I just wanted to highlight for the LPC is that as Peter and Aaron and the village started to kind of draw these lines on here for the potential kind of broadening, if you will, of the Riverwalk Trail, it started to become very clear the projects that are on the list that you're contemplating along here currently. Now, obviously, you haven't refined that list, and those are still up for discussion this evening. But Here is the Children's Museum, the Arts Council, the Streetscape project here, which is a separate project that Peter had referenced, the Fall Island Skate Park, the Whitewater Park. Over here, which is a project identified for needing additional information, but the Market Square Mall. And this really became kind of this connector, if you will, for both public and private projects that are being proposed and are currently on the list that you are evaluating. So just wanted to point that out.
On that note, I was just curious if it made any sense or if there was any thought to, I realize this is the Riverwalk Trail, but the kind of upper right-hand corner of that image, the map there has there's two other private projects up there, the McDuff's and then the food co-op proposed relocation spot. And it did occur to me that it might be interesting to try to incorporate those in some, wayfinding or something like that.
All right. So next up, we're going to stick with the public improvement projects list. So Sarah's going to talk through the downtown streetscape.
Sure. So the Downtown Streetscape Enhancement Project is another public improvement project that's been proposed by the village. This will include improvements to the Raymond and Market Street in the Market Street Historic District. The project will include ADA accessibility, some pedestrian safety improvements, including new sidewalks, lighting, and improved traffic islands at the intersection of Market, Main, and Maple Street. The total project cost for this and DRI request is $2.8 million. And this also ties directly into the proposed Riverwalk Trail. So here's a rendering of that showing the extent of the project going from that intersection of Maple, Main, and Market all the way up to Depot Street, as well as down Raymond Street. Okay. Next up is the St. Lawrence Whitewater Park.
Wait, can I go back to the other one?
Absolutely.
So I noticed on this rendering, there's an arrow down Raymond Street. Is that decided that will be one way, or is that up for discussion? Because I know that there's some people, there's some businesses who do not want that to be a one-way street. Is that a final thing? And the other part is, I don't know. I still wish the block on Market Street that, I don't necessarily want a pedestrian thing, but it's 6 with the 2 parking lanes and 4 lanes of traffic. Is there any consideration to make the middle of that street just two 1 lane each way? Or is this all final, like this can't change? This is what the plan is if it goes forward.
Rose, this is Fred. Regards Raymond Street, we have had some discussions with property owners on Raymond Street about turning that into a one-way street. There's been a property transfer in that neighborhood. There's a property owner that may be willing to help us kind of reconfigure traffic flow through that entire neighborhood, and pretty dramatic changes at that. So nothing's really off the table at this point.
Okay.
But we haven't gone to final design either. I think that there are some questions that we really need to address before we can say definitively one way or the other. I will tell you though that there, again, with any public project that we do, there'll be an opportunity for the public to come out and review plans before they're adopted, so that everybody understands what the scope of work is and the schedule.
All right. Thank you.
Right, if I could, and Rose, if I could respond to the specifics on, and I don't know if Steve is here from the DOT, but obviously anything that would be done on Market Street between Main and Elm would have to, or any segment of that street, of Market Street, going all the way up to Sandstone Drive, or even all the way up through Outer Market, would require DOT to have a traffic study that allows for that, and have to have some discussion. So there's an additional layer of discussion that has to go forward anyhow, I think we could certainly have those conversations, but there'd have to be, the DOT has to be deeply involved. It is a state highway.
Okay.
Can I also just chime in on Lee's question about linking up the projects on the northern end of Market Street, McDuff's, and some of the other ones that we've had there. We in our local waterfront revitalization plan that we did back in 2012, we proposed to do some renovation work on Depot Street. We just don't have the resources to handle it at this point. But Peter from CLA came up with some kind of interesting wayfinding improvements that we may propose for the streetscape enhancement project that would better link it to the Riverwalk. Peter, do you want to just comment on what you guys were thinking about as a way, kind of a nice way of pulling the Riverwalk and the streetscape improvements together?
Peter, I think you're muted.
Yeah, so one of the projects we're involved with now in the city of Rome is actually creating these markers and trail markers and interpretive signage that we can actually, put in the street and wayfinding along the street that will actually create some connectivity. So there's definitely opportunities to actually extend and create some wayfinding, at McDuff's and kind of in that region. So there's just a lot of really nice design vocabulary that we can create in the sidewalks with signage, with interpretation that could help inform any visitors where certain landmarks are and how to go through the space. In the sidewalks themselves with markers and also through signage, so wayfinding signage. So there's definitely ways to do that connectivity without getting into full, streetscape reconstruction. But I think we definitely should take a look at that and, see if some of the markers that we have already identified will be included for that.
Peter, can I just ask,
very feasible.
when that wayfinding, when that signage is done, it would be nice to find something that is easily changeable. So, I mean, sometimes there's a wayfinding to a business that you think is going to be there forever, and then it isn't. And then you end up with signs that don't represent what's really there. And it would be nice to be able to have not only the ones that have been there forever, so you think they're worth the wayfinding sign, but maybe other businesses to help people locate them, but that could change over time.
Right. There's all kinds of systems now available for graphic replacement, with different businesses and things and plaques and ways to change out graphics on those signs. So that would definitely be a consideration.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Are there any more questions for this project? Okay. Moving on to the next public improvement project. This is another project proposed by the Village of Potsdam, and this will be the St. Lawrence Whitewater Park. So this project is the creation of a proposed canoe kayak park on the Racket River near Fall Island. The park will include put-in paths and takeout paths for the canoers and kayakers, a pavilion, restrooms, as well as whitewater features in the river. The DRI project cost and, the total project cost and DRI ask are at $2.6 million. And on this next page, we have a rendering showing some of those amenities. And what I like about this is it also shows some of the connections to the proposed Fall Island Skate Park, that's G, down near Maple Avenue, as well as the Riverwalk Trail. Are there any questions about this one? Okay. Moving on. Finally, the last public improvement project that's been proposed by the village is the Fall Island Skate Park and Outdoor Art Gallery. So this will obviously be at Fall Island Park. And the village proposes to implement this in partnership with the North Country skateboarders. Some of the amenities to the new park will include a sculpture park, as well as art benches, a pedestrian walkway, and some other items for skateboarders. The project will also tie into the proposed Whitewater Park and the downtown Riverwalk, kind of in that key center of activity for the town, for the village. Next up, we have actually a rendering of the park showing some of the proposed amenities. And here you can see that pedestrian walkway, some of the features for the skateboarders, including a bowl. We also have seating areas as well as those proposed arc benches. Okay. Are there any questions about this one? Okay.
So next up is the Rebuild Downtown Potsdam. This is within that revolving loan and grant fund category. So this program is a collection of what is intended to be flexible grant programs that will assist eligible applicants with matching grants for downtown revitalization. There are 3 programs that are currently proposed as part of the Rebuild Downtown Potsdam: a rent assistance program, a Main Street building renovation program, and a quick start grant program. So currently the DRI request is at $600,000. That has previously been the maximum amount of DRI requests that has been allowable through the DRI program for this particular project category. In recent weeks, we have learned that the state has increased that maximum amount for up to $750,000 for capital improvements. However, those capital improvements and the grant program and description and application itself must allow for COVID-19 related capital improvements to be eligible for the program. So one of the things that we will want to talk with you as an LPC about tonight is whether or not you would like to increase the DRI request for this particular project to $750,000. And because this is a matching program, that would then increase the total project cost. And so I just wanted we wanted to make sure to bring you up to speed on that. And before I ask for any questions from the LPC, I would like to ask if Barbara and Leslie, our Department of State partners, have anything to add or any further clarification of that change in the revolving loan and grant fund project category.
Yes, Jackie, thank you. I did get a list of project types that could be used for, for this capital improvements for COVID-related, dealing with COVID-related capital improvements. So maybe I'll just read those if that's okay. So reconfiguration of existing facilities to encourage reduced density, redesign and updates for air filtering or ventilation systems, equipment or software required to increase business capacity and efficiency in a post-COVID climate. And this would be such as online sales, point of sale systems. This would be one-time purchases only. So not something like subscription or membership fees, one-time purchase of that type of equipment. Next is fixtures and equipment to partition customers, guide social distancing, or provide contact-less sales opportunities. And then finally, interior and exterior improvements to support adjusted business practices, such as pickup windows or outdoor seating areas. And this list came from apparently HCR. Mary's not here tonight, unfortunately, but HCR is finalizing some guidance that will put this into writing. But they gave us this, we could provide this for you tonight to give you these ideas of different project types.
Thank you, Barbara. Are there questions from the LPC with regard to the optional changes for this particular project?
I have a question. Can we wait and decide on this? Like, once all these go to the state, depending on what the state says yes or no to, it's, you know, it's, if they cut a project, it's not going to necessarily come to the exact amount. Maybe they cut something and then there is that extra 100,000 that we would put in there. I mean, if we decide now to definitely do it, then that takes away $150,000 from the consideration of all the other projects, which doesn't seem a whole lot in the scope of it, but can it just be decided later?
You need to decide what's going to go into the strategic investment plan as your DRI request. So, yeah, I mean, I think you need to make that decision now. That's not saying that later, you know, sometimes if a project falls off, numbers can change, but that usually happens more with the private projects, the ones that Steve and Mary are, well, and the HCR is the one that
But what I mean, Barbara, is that, you know, we don't know what the state's going to decide. I mean, they're going to cut some projects, and those projects have different values. So we might end up being cut, so we are on the shorter side, and maybe there will be money to just say, okay, then why don't we just, this is what we want, and there'll be money to do that. Or I don't, maybe it won't make that much of a difference. It's only $100,000, but I don't know. It just.
We wouldn't cut less than 9.7 million. I mean, we work with HCR and ESD, and we end up with 9.7 million.
You might not fund some projects to the,
which is not that easy. If you
to the entirety that they want, right?
It's really difficult. It's not that easy. We look really hard at these projects and consider, you know, a lot of factors. So okay. I think if the LPC wants to discuss it and decide that they want the 750,000, that's what I think you would go forward with. But again, I wanted to emphasize, say again that the 750 does not have to be used for the COVID related capital improvement. The additional 150 does not have to be used for those improvements, but we want you to give that opportunity to businesses to be able to use it for that. So the whole 750 could be used for business, for projects that don't relate to COVID, but the program that you put together with HCR has to have that language in it. So we want that opportunity to be available.
Okay, thank you.
And something else, if I could interject for the LPC to consider, and this is, you know, consideration for all projects, but looking at what the DRI funding can leverage for total project costs and total investment by project within your community. So if you're looking at right now at $600,000, the total leverage, if you will, is over $1 million with that $600,000 quote investment from the DRI. So thinking about kind of how far the DRI funding can go within your downtown, and thinking about if that additional $150,000 were included in this program, you know, what that would do from a leveraging perspective for projects. That might be smaller projects that might not elevate to the level of DRI transformative catalytic projects, but collectively can have a big impact on your downtown and revitalizing your downtown. So just something else to think about.
Yeah, I don't know how much we want to get into discussing it, but personally, it seems to me like it would be worth strongly considering that, just because I find the idea of sort of the local control aspect to be very appealing. You know, I think we've all been working with Fred now for a while, and the way I read it, there would be a lot more sort of flexibility and local control of how that funding was used, and that seems like something that could be quite valuable. But again, I don't. If this isn't the right place to discuss that, hold that thought.
Hold that thought. Okay. Other questions about the program? All right. Next up is the downtown branding program. So this is proposed to create and implement a branding and marketing program to promote downtown Potsdam. This would be a comprehensive program that includes design standards for print media, digital media, outdoor signage. It would be a way to really kind of shape and brand your downtown. A new website is proposed, enhanced communication and coordination with other entities within the region that are promoting the region. And so the current DRI request for this is $125,000. Questions about that? Okay. Next up, Sarah's going to talk through the North Country Children's Museum.
Sure. So these are our new development and rehabilitation projects. So the first one is the North Country Children's Museum expansion, and that's been proposed by the North Country Children's Museum at 10 Raymond Street. So this project, the museum will expand into the vacant second floor space, and we'll be renovating the first floor and basement spaces for an ADA accessible elevator. These improvements will allow for additional exhibits, classroom, and programming space. The project is also in close proximity to the Riverwalk Trail that's been proposed. Right now, the total project cost is $1.9 million with a total DRI request of 1.4. Are there any questions about this project? Okay. Hearing none and moving on. Oh, there we go. Next up is the Potsdam Food Co-op, relocation and expansion. So this is going to be at 63 Market Street. So the Food Co-op, as you probably know, has outgrown their current location and proposes to relocate to this new 63 Market Street location. The expansion will actually allow for 4,000 square feet of sales area. And the building renovation will provide new facilities, office, and classroom spaces, as well as a new bakery and a deli. Right now, the total project cost is just under $3 million, with a DRI ask of only 1.7. Are there any questions about this project?
Sarah and Jackie, if I could, this is Kelly Hitchman. I do just want to make sure I declare a new conflict of interest.
Okay.
I was recently elected to the board of directors of the co-op, so I will appropriately refrain from voting or discussion as needed.
Congratulations, Kelly, and thank you for disclosing that.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Also, the food co-op has informed us that they've actually formed a committee and they've begun the steps with an attorney to form a nonprofit Friends of the Food Co-op, and that will open them up for additional grant opportunities. Okay. Next is the Sandstone. So this project is proposed by Dwayne Pelkey, and it's going to be at 22 Market Street. So this project will include the expansion of the current Scoops ice cream into a 1940s, 1950s themed seasonal diner. The diner will offer options for breakfast and lunch, as well as the ice cream options that are already offered. The renovation will actually add covered outdoor seating, which will allow for socially distanced dining in the future. The total project cost has remained the same at $257,000, and the total DRI request has reduced slightly to $110,000. Are there any questions about this project?
Okay. Next up is the Roxy Theater alterations and repairs. This is the Roxy Theater that I think everybody is familiar with. This includes exterior renovations to the theater, as well as improvements to the interior vestibule, replacements of the signboard and facade improvements and upgrades. The total project cost for this is $115,000. And the DRI request is $58,000 for this project. Questions? Okay. Next, we have 59 Market Street. This is the location of the current McDuff's Tavern on the corner. This project includes a series of exterior improvements, including accessible and ADA compliance and accessible entranceway, and improvements to the interior as well. Facade improvements and a new roof are also included. The interior improvements include the renovation of the basement to create a multi-use space with multimedia functionality. It also will include flooring, bathrooms, and a high efficiency boiler. So those are the elements that are included in the total project cost, and the DRI request for this is at $203,000. Questions about this project? Next up are the upgrades to the Clarkson Inn. This is right at the intersection of Maple and Market. So this project includes an expansion and interior renovation of the inn, which will include 20 additional rooms and modern meeting space, as well as a fitness center. The rooms will be designed to fit in with the current character of the inn, and additional upgrades will be made to the existing space, including replacement of furniture, fixtures, equipment, with an emphasis on highlighting improved technological offerings. And the plan does call to add, does include adding 300 to 600 square feet of additional meeting space. The total project cost is at $2.5 million, and the total DRI request is at $600,000. And we have received updated site plans and plans for this since we were last together in March. Questions about this project?
I had one. I'm not sure if anyone here can answer, but I looked at it and looked at the site plan, and it appears to me that the way that the addition would be sort of angled would make sure to fully accommodate the existing kind of pedestrian infrastructure along the river. But I was just wondering if someone could kind of confirm that.
Oh, go ahead, Fred. Yes.
Yeah, Jared Weston has gone through site plan review with this with the planning board a couple of years ago. And we looked at some renovation plans that look very close to what you're seeing in your packet. It would continue to be a two-story building. It would not infringe on the pedestrian walkway that's there presently, although obviously it would be in addition to the building. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Fred. It looked like I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to, infringe on the riverfront there at all.
Thank you, Fred. Other questions with regard to this project? Okay. Next, we have the North Country Arts Center. This is located at 6 and 8 Raymond Street. This is also another private development and rehabilitation project. This project is proposed to transform what is primarily a vacant building at this time into the North Country Arts Center. The space will include a retail store, professional art gallery, performance hall, classroom, offices, and a private studio space for local artists to work. The downstairs of this is proposed to include the existing art gallery, which is there now, performing arts wing with a rehearsal room, and a visual arts wing with an open concept maker space. And there will be specialized equipment for photography included as part of this. This is also intended to transform the existing garage into a small pocket park. The total project cost for this is at $1.6 million, and the total DRI request is at $979,000. Are there questions about this project?
should also mention that this project is in close proximity to the proposed Riverwalk Trail, as well as the streetscape enhancements at Raymond Street and Children's Museum.
All right. Go ahead,
So
Sarah.
hearing none, these next two projects were on the needs more information list as of the March 17th meeting. And to this date, all information that we've requested from these project sponsors has been received. So they were they replied very quickly. So the Market Square Mall DRI alterations and repairs has been proposed by Brooks Washburn. And this project is located at Market Square Mall at 20 and 22 Depot Street. This project will include interior and exterior renovations to the Market Square Mall, including roofing repairs, new siding, new canopies, as well as a new sign tower proposed in the southeast corner of the building, which you can see in this rendering right here. Oh, if my mouse works. There you go. And this project is also in proximity to the Riverwalk improvements, as well as the Children's Museum. So the DRI request for this project is $311,000. And I should note that the DRI request has been reduced since we last met. The project cost has remained the same and the scope has remained the same, but the project sponsor reduced his DRI ask. Are there any questions about this project?
I'm sorry. I actually was wondering if I actually did have more questions about the sandstone, and I'm so sorry to bring this up here, but I was trying to find all the bits and pieces. Can we go back to that later, or what would be best?
Sure. I think Maggie, if you would be okay with kind of making sure to take note of those questions, we will go back and talk about each of the projects individually.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
If you're comfortable with that.
That's no problem at all. And thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Don't forget them, please.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, great. So the last project on our list is the Damon Hall renovation. This project has been proposed by Clarkson University at Damon Hall on 67 Main Street. So this project will complete the renovation of Damon Hall through improvements to the vacant third floor space to make room for additional incubator space. The scope of this project has expanded due to some of the increased demand that they've seen for incubator space in the Clarkson campus. This project is now anticipated to host up to 50 employees in the new space. Even though the scope of the project has increased slightly, the DRI request has remained unchanged. So the total project cost is roughly $3.3 million with a total DRI request of $1.6 million. Are there any questions about this project?
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so before we get into the LPC discussion, a more detailed discussion about the projects on the list, we did want to remind everyone of the fact that you can, as an LPC, identify projects that might not be recommended for the DRI program funding, but are still critical to your downtown revitalization. And those projects can be identified within your strategic investment plan. And the benefit of getting identified within your strategic investment plan is that if these projects were to seek other funding, it certainly will help in making their case for the significance and the importance of those projects through their additional funding applications. So at our at our March meeting, our LPC meeting number 4, these were the projects that you see on your screen that you had identified at that point in time as being potential projects to list in your strategic investment plan. I'm quickly going to run through those. That includes the 9 Market Street project, which is the bagelry improvements, the PERT building renovation, the townhouse renovation, the Snell Theater project, the Congdon Hall material handling equipment project, the project Blue Dodo, and the restoration of Condon Hall. So we will also revisit this list after we've gone through the potential slate of projects at the end of our discussion this evening to see if any of these on this list come off, or if there are others that come on to this list to be identified in your strategic plan. Okay. So with that, that kind of wraps up our overview of where we are for the projects. And I'd just like to quickly highlight some reminders to keep in the back of your mind as you're going through your discussions together through this next stage of our meeting. The state has recommended that you identify between $12 and $16 million worth of DRI requests as part of this, and that we do identify if there are projects that you would like to have included in your strategic investment plan, that those get identified as well. And that is what we're hoping to achieve this evening. Key elements to be thinking about, again, highlighting some of those things that you have already been utilizing to evaluate the projects thus far, but just some of the key ones. The project readiness. Are these projects that you're thinking about, are they ready to go? The idea is to have DRI be that help to take a project over the finish line, if you will, and to kind of help complete the project so that it can be implemented right away. Looking at the capacity of the project sponsor to actually implement this project as it's proposed, the leveraging of the DRI funding, whether it's leveraging of private investment or leveraging of other funding sources that a project might already be having identified. Does the project sponsor have control of the site? That kind of leads back to the project readiness factor. And then the question, why DRI? Why is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative program necessary to advance this project? Or are there other funding sources that might be available for this particular project that you might be talking about? And then general consistency with the DRI goals and strategies. So for each project, we find that it's a little helpful to think about it in these terms. Number one, we're going to ask you to think about, do you recommend this project for DRI funding? If yes, great, it's on the list. If not, would you recommend it with a different DRI request amount? And then let's talk about that, but recognizing that that might impact the ability of the project to advance. Do you not want to recommend this project for DRI funding? If you don't, do you want to include it in the strategic investment plan? So this is kind of the thought process and the steps that we'd like to go through with you for each of the projects on the list. This is just a disclaimer for those members of the public that might be listening. The following list and those projects that we've been talking about to date represent the slate of projects as it stands right now. The final slate of projects is something that we hope will be coming out of this meeting, and also could very well be refined following public feedback and the public engagement that we had highlighted is occurring at the end of this month. All right, so recap of where we are, and then we will turn it over to the LPC for all of you to have a discussion. But this is the current list of projects that we have just provided an overview for. In the green box, those are the projects that you have identified as potentially advancing through the DRI and recommending for DRI. In the smaller box at the bottom, the kind of orange cream colored box, that includes those two projects that at the last time we spoke, you had identified as needing more information. Those projects might have been on the fence of whether or not you wish to have recommend those for DRI. Where we are at this point with those projects in the green box, you stand at a DRI request of $13.9 million. If you were to consider adding those two additional projects that you identified as needing more information, that request would be for DRI funding would be at 15.8 million. So just wanted to let you know where you are there. All right. The way that we'd like to walk through this, and we'll see how it works. So I hope you have some patience with this. The way that we would like to walk through this is to start and kind of just walk down through the list of each project. Open it up for people to be able to talk about it. Our team is here. Your state partners are here to help answer any questions. The village partners are here to help answer any questions you might have as you go through this. Okay. So with that, I'd like to start with the downtown Riverwalk and see if there are any questions or comments or discussions, and ask you, would you like to recommend this project for DRI funding?
If I may, I have a more general question. In the project list and everything that gets sent to the state, at what point, or is there a point where we actually put this in order of priority for us, or do we always just leave it by ID?
So I will start answering that, and then if our state partners would like to follow up, that would be great. This committee, the local planning committee, does not prioritize the projects. So the projects are advanced to the state as a slate of projects recommended for DRI funding. The state then, from that entire slate of projects, will select which projects will be identified to receive DRI funding. Barbara, Leslie, Steve, is there anything that you want to add? And hopefully that was accurate.
Yeah, that what Jackie said is right on. You know, we don't want you to prioritize the projects. We want, you know, the list to be the ones that are the most important to the community. And, you know, the reason for that is, you know, with this planning process, sometimes, and as Jackie had said before, sometimes projects fall out, they get a new owner, you know, things change, priorities change within that business. So that's why we ask you to submit the higher amount of projects, and especially this year that, you know, that could be the case. So we just want you to weigh them all together and submit it as a package, thinking very strongly, as has been said by the consultants, how they work, how these complement each other, and how they are transformative to the community and, you know, working together as a whole.
Thank you.
So downtown Riverwalk discussion, is this something that you wish to continue to keep on the list for DRI funding recommendation?
Keep on the list.
Definitely. I love the updates. They're great.
Let's do.
I want to keep it on the list.
Sounds like the consensus is to keep it on the list. Is there anyone who would like to not keep it on the list? I guess maybe we'll go there. Hearing silence, we are going to mark this down as staying on the list and move on to the downtown streetscape project.
Put on the list.
For less.
Keep it on the list.
I'm seeing thumbs up and
On the
hearing.
list.
Keep it on the list. All right. We are marking that for keep it on the list. The St. Lawrence Whitewater Park.
I'd like to comment on that. I love the project, but I'm looking at the ask of, you know, all these public projects. And I think that the scope of this one is very big, and there may be possibility for down the road, maybe a different kind of funding for this project. I would personally rather see the two in the orange box at the bottom up on top and that one out. That's just my thinking. One, they both have more leverage to them. And the Damon Hall, at first I had reservations about it, but in terms of it being an incubator space and bringing jobs, that I kind of would like to see that up there. So that's my thinking of consider taking Whitewater off and adding those two. Those are my thoughts.
Other thoughts?
So this is Eric. Eric Backus. My comment would be more: is it 2.6, or is there some lesser number that would get us enough to get this really going with potential of adding other funds? But for the potential specifically of bringing, as I think Rose said, the other two projects up. Obviously, disclosing I'm a Clarkson employee. Clarkson owns Damon Hall, but more along the lines of if there's interest in the rest of the committee to bring those up, is there a lesser way we could do instead of 2.6? There's a smaller number we could do.
We did hear at our last meeting of the LPC that phasing the Whitewater project was not going to be feasible, was what the consultants had told us. So I guess I would be curious, what, other than phasing the project, how could we reduce its cost?
This is Fred. We initially, there were a number of different phases for the Whitewater Park project, and so that the LPC had the benefit of seeing the cost for each of the three major phases. It was decided to present that to you. There are two phases, potentially three, that could be done. Where the cost savings would come in is really with the permitting. Permitting for this type of a facility is extremely time consuming and it's costly. So if you get that out of the way, it makes the entire project a little bit easier to finance. But it could be phased if needs be.
What kind of significant responses have we gotten from the public on this one? I don't remember hearing about it.
Yeah, we have that. We have that information uploaded to the LPC Dropbox. From my recollection, I believe this project had a high level of public support.
There was support for that.
I would say I hear the different perspectives on this, and it was interesting hearing the presentation from sorry, I'm forgetting names. Peter with CLA Site, sort of talking about the Whitewater project as sort of a centerpiece for the downtown Riverwalk and things. I guess my feeling is it could be a centerpiece to that, but the river itself, with or without a Whitewater project, remains a centerpiece for our community. But yeah, I'm personally not. I'm not sure I'm ready to weigh in, yay or nay on this.
This is Fred. The one thing that I would point out is this is not an isolated project. This is one project in a larger St. Lawrence County proposal to develop Whitewater Park facilities that are accessible to people with varying degrees of experience with the most challenging park being in Colton at Stone Valley, an intermediate slalom run in Canton, and a beginner rodeo hole in Potsdam. So when we developed the concept for this, we really developed it as kind of a regional economic development and tourism proposal, something that was unique, that would bring people to the community or assist in university recruiting.
Fred, has Canton started their project?
I had a conversation with Keith Zimmerman last night. Canton is, I think they're maybe a step or two behind us in terms of their desire to get their project rolling. My hope would be that they are.
Yeah. I guess my concern is that when the state looks at this, they're going to look at those top 3 items. And I guess I don't want to risk losing the first 2 if they think the Whitewater Park is more valuable. Because I think the first 2 are more valuable. I guess that's where I just feel like it just maybe gives us a little more control over what the public work projects will be. I don't know. My feeling is the state's not going to fund all 3 of those just because of the money.
If I could just mention that, you know, one of the things that we look at is, are there other funding sources? So the Whitewater Park would be eligible for the DOS Local Waterfront Revitalization Program funds. Other communities have received funding for Whitewater Park feasibility studies and some implementation from our program if they have a waterfront revitalization plan. And Potsdam does have a strategy for waterfront revitalization. So it would be eligible. Of course, there's never any guarantee. I can't guarantee that you know, our grant program is very competitive, but it would be eligible for that funding source.
What I was speaking to earlier with public support, I just was able to find it in our Dropbox, the Potsdam DRI public meeting number 2 summary. This of the 3 large public improvement projects, this had varied support, and it was a much greater percentage of low support than high support. So that was what I was remembering about this, and I definitely always want to keep the public opinion in mind here.
So let me ask the local planning committee, is this a project that you may want to identify in the strategic investment plan?
I say for sure.
Well, it would definitely, it won't go off the table for that, but I don't think it's so quick to say we're going to put it right there and then not have it as a DRI project. I think there's a, I don't think this is a black or white. I think I would say there's a shade of gray here, and I just don't know where the shade of gray fits. It could potentially end up being in just the SRI, but I don't know. I think we should have a conversation about that. I was proposing a reduction in support here that may be tied to other grants that we do, or a phased approach, as Fred mentioned, might be possible. But that's where I was looking at it. I don't want to necessarily put it. It won't. I don't think it should fall off the table and say not at all for either one.
I agree.
I don't think we want to go immediately and put it in the. At least I don't want to put it in the strategic investment plan only at this point.
This is Cindy. I am not in support of having this fall off the table either. As Fred mentioned, this is part of a much bigger county project. And I look at St. Lawrence County as needing some big ticket items to bring people into the area. And I do understand that maybe there is, you know, some other funding, but I would not be in favor of removing this from our request at this point.
One other thing to consider is DRI funds can be used as match for our LWRP program. So the two could be complement each other.
And that would be a recommendation the state would make, possibly.
Well, no, you could have that in the strategic investment plan. I mean, if you decide to do what Eric was saying and have some DRI and some, you could have a lower amount and then identify in the strategic investment plan that, you know, application for LWRP funds.
So Barbara, if this went ahead and the state eliminated it, does that automatically go into the strategic and to the other part? Like, if we want it up here, but then the state decides not to fund it, would it go into the strategic investment plan?
Your DRI plan, once the consultants finish putting that together with your recommended list, that still stays with your 13 or 14 or $15 million ask. That's what you decided is important to you. If the state then uses that, for us, and plus other considerations, to make our decision of which ones to fund. When Jackie talks about the strategic investment plan, it's the whole thing. It's the first, for the beginning is there's going to be, description of the community and what your goals and objectives and strategies are, and then your DRI request, and then additional projects that are important to you, but you're not asking for money for. So it's all one package for whatever DRI ask amount that you want to ask for.
Barbara, this is Fred. Just a question. As I understand it, the match request for the local waterfront revitalization program it's now 25%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So at 25%, if we were to do a DRI request for 1.9 million, we could theoretically apply for the other 25% through LWRP, correct? Or vice versa?
Vice versa, I think.
Yeah. So you.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to. Yeah, I mean, if you asked for, 500,000. If you asked for 500,000 from LWRP, you have to. How am I thinking of this right? 750,000 from LWRP, you'd have to match it with 250, and that 250 could come from DRI. So I just threw out those numbers, but.
In some ways, that might make our application, that project more appropriate for the state part to choose, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, it might make it easier for the state to say, okay, we're going to put the 250, 400, whatever it is, the smaller amount towards the White Water Park, because we've already thought of using these other available funds to make this happen.
It's always good to show that you know of the other funding sources, and we also ask for you to, the consultants and the community, to mention our programs in the plan itself. Yeah, to recognizing the other programs that can complement DRI. That's what this is all about. That's why the plan is more than 10 million, because you are recognizing there are other sources. Empire State Development, Steve is here, and they have a huge, program that can be utilized. So yes, that's definitely a good thing to emphasize.
So I might suggest, so that we can continue discussing through some of the other projects, that this one get put on hold for now. We can talk through some of the other projects and see where we're landing in terms of perhaps the total DRI request. And then maybe that might help shape the discussion in terms of what the DRI request this group feels comfortable with for the Whitewater Park. Does that make sense with everybody right now? All right, so we will come back to the Whitewater Park. Next on the list is the Fall Island Skate Park at $258,000 for the DRI request. Is this a project you wish to have continue to be recommended for DRI funding?
Yes. Absolutely. I think this looks great and ties really well into the first two projects.
Other comments? Questions? All right. I'm hearing no opposition to this remaining on the list, so we will mark it as remaining on the list. Okay, next up is the Rebuild Downtown Potsdam. If you'll recall, we talked about the current DRI request is at 600,000. The state is allowing for this particular project category to be increased up to 750,000, with the caveat that projects, eligible projects include capital improvements related to COVID-19 as an option. Is this, number one, would you like to have this continue on as being recommended for DRI funding? The second part of that, do you want to increase the funding request to $750,000?
Yes and yes.
I agree with both.
Okay, other
Yes.
other input?
I appreciate the fact that the state's allowing us to increase the ask, because if you look at the number of vacancies downtown at the moment, you know, COVID-19 is really, it's closed down a lot of the food service establishments that we have. Likely there'll be some retail closures as well. And having some resources to help rebound downtown's economy will be just tremendously helpful. And a lot of the things that Barbara ticked off on her list of eligible improvements are things that I've heard from downtown business owners that they need. So kudos to the state.
With that segue, I just wanted to add a couple things. I'm reading back the email that had those list of items that could be included. Before that, the program administrators did say that whatever business wants to consider this activity, the COVID maintenance improvements, they need to document the impact of COVID on the participating business or property owner, the need for the funding, and an explanation for how the investment impacts the sustainability and resiliency of the business or property. So just want to make sure everybody that's in the mix of thinking about that.
Maybe I'll speak as somebody who's just spent a lot of money trying to reconfigure a university for COVID-19 and students. It's very, very expensive. And when I think about the needs of our businesses, I would very much want to support our businesses being able to make those needed changes.
So I'm seeing a lot of head nods here. Any other thoughts or comments about this? So we will mark it down based on this discussion as staying on the list for DRI recommendation and increasing the DRI request to $750,000. Okay. Next up is the downtown branding campaign at a DRI request of $125,000.
Looks good.
I concur. We should keep it on the list. I think we need to be able to tell people the story, what's going on here. Investments, we need to get the word out.
Any concerns with keeping this on the list for DRI funding recommendation? Okay, hearing none, we will mark this as remaining on the list at that DRI request amount. Next up is the North Country Children's Museum with a DRI request of $1.4 million. Thoughts about keeping this on the list for DRI recommendation? Okay, let me rephrase that. Any concerns or anyone that wishes to not have this advance as DRI, a recommended project? Okay.
Maybe I can put some commentary here. I don't know for or against. I think the thing is that the North Country Children's Museum has wide community support. I don't think there's anyone here who says that they don't love this gem that we have in Potsdam as not even for Potsdam, but just broadly for the North Country and so forth. I just think also that there's been significant investment made by the community in a lot of ways, different ways, to make it a reality today. And I think that's been great. And I think it's a rallying point for us. I think maybe the silence is we just don't know if this is the right amount, the right right thing necessarily in terms of what may be needed. I know that there's with change because of some hazardous materials there, so on and so forth. But I think that's where I think there's a pause because there's a lot of things on the list we'd like to do, and this is one that's certainly got wide support in terms of feeling by the community, but at the same time, I don't know if it's something that's the end all be all on the list of things we want to get done. So with this particular funding, so I think there's a lot of support. It's just not being vocalized per se as one way or the other right now.
I appreciate you saying that, Eric, but I do disagree. I think that the Children's Museum has the potential to be a huge component of our community and our whole region. If you go to children's museums in Boston or New York City or all over the country, they're huge draws. Just like we were talking about with the Whitewater Park, it's a tourism spot. It's really, I think that the more this can grow in the space it's in, the more value it'll bring to our downtown.
I didn't mean to disparage it in any way, Maggie. I think the point was just that, and I agree with you. That's why it's a regional gem. That's all. I'll leave it there.
Can I ask a couple dumb questions? Is the museum closed currently every day because of COVID?
That is a good question. And Sarah, you've had several conversations with Sharon.
I don't know for sure if the museum is open in any capacity, but I do know that they do have some online programming. I don't have the specifics on that, but I can follow up with you.
I guess I'd ask.
There was actually an article in the newspaper that said that they were going to be reopening on a limited basis on September the 2nd.
Okay.
I think they're also running some summer camp programs as well over the next few weeks.
They are. I was in there the other day helping David make a repair, and there are children coming in for some programming. So on a limited basis, they are.
So I asked the question for what kind of financial impact is COVID having on the museum, and what has that changed about what their plans are for the future? I guess that's never really been updated or talked about.
Well, I do know that we have had in the recent, probably over the past couple of months, have had conversations with Sharon as the executive director. They have identified, and if you look at the breakdown of their proposed budget, they are proposing to leverage other dollars, other funding grant sources as part of this overall project. And as with anyone, the status of those potential future grant sources is really a bit up in the air right now. But there are other projects on this list as well that have identified other grant sources as kind of the leveraging of the DRI dollars. I do know that the North Country Children's Museum is fully committed to advancing what they need to do for this, and are actively seeking other funding sources right now to be able to help help bring this project to fruition in addition to the DRI request.
I know that Sharon just within the last couple of weeks applied for a National Endowment of the Humanities grant as part of her match to the DRI request. So they're actively looking at funding. I think she's also reached out to the New York Power Authority for power proceeds assistance.
Yes.
Am I remembering?
Go ahead, Kristen.
I was just, am I remembering correctly that this project had a very, very high level of support in the public meetings?
I believe so, yeah.
I believe this one did, yes. And Rob, the point that you raise, I think, is a very valid one, particularly given the time that we find ourselves in. And I think that's why, as we're going through this and as you're looking at that total DRI request amount, I think we need to take into consideration, if projects are not able to advance at the time within which the state makes the announcement, are there sufficient enough projects or a sufficient enough DRI request within your slate of projects to have that impact on your downtown and to maximize that $9.7 million worth of DRI funding.
Yeah, I just think with the fears of children going back to school and the unknown of this winter coming, who knows what's going to happen. If children aren't in school, they're not going to the museum. It's going to be the same scary situation all around. So just something to think about.
Becky, I need to interrupt for 1 second. Lee just texted me. His iPad died and he needs to be let back into the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can't see that while we have our screen up, so hold on.
I may be a little hard of hearing. Did you say Lee's cat died?
No, iPad.
Oh, iPad. Oh, okay. I thought you said cat. Phew, that was close.
I'm back. No, don't.
Lee,
don't
are
say
you
that
back?
don't say that about my cat.
I'm sure it's a lovely cat.
Sorry
Thank
for
you, Rose.
All right. Welcome back, Lee.
Thanks.
Hold on, let me just hit close. There we go. Okay. So what is the LPC's general consensus on the North Country Children's Museum? Do you want to keep it on the list for now for DRI recommended funding?
I think it should stay on the list. And if the state sees, the state could always decide to cut it back some, right? If they could fund it at a lower amount. Right? Isn't that an option? The state will cut it back if they want to.
I think it is an option, but I'm going to let the state. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, these are all your recommendations, and then the state, reviews them and makes a determination.
But it's not always all or nothing. It could be
right.
Just
Correct.
less. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So based on that, I'm going to, for now, and we'll revisit this list after we go through everything, identify the North Country Children's Museum as remaining on the list for DRI recommended funding. Okay. Next up is the Potsdam Food Co-op relocation at 1.6 million for the DRI request. Discussions and thoughts about this project advancing on the DRI recommended list.
I think it should. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it should stay on the list. I see it as definitely a piece with all these other projects and something that could actually have a transformative impact and employ some people. So I would like to see it stay.
I concur.
I agree. I think relocation is really a key piece for making the greater downtown work better. Just given where its current location of the food co-op is, I think it's moving. It makes a really big difference.
It also proposes to create some new full-time employment positions and pay taxes.
I'm upset that I might lose a place to plow at in the wintertime because it was currently a place I plowed. So if the village will take care of that now, hey, even better.
They have a small parking lot, 22 or 23 car parking lot in the rear, Rob.
Okay.
Hopefully a new business will go there, Robin. You can still do it.
Perfect.
Right.
Sounds good.
Catalyze some action. That's the idea here.
All right. So based on that, we are going to mark this project as remaining on the list to be recommended for DRI funding at this point. So next up is the Sandstone with a DRI request of $110,000. Maggie, you had some questions. Can we help address any questions that you might have had for this project?
Yeah, thank you. I was interested to see the updates on this, on its, sorry, I don't have words. A lot of these projects are continuing as if COVID either never happened or as if we're going to just forget that it happened in the past. But this one is very much changed to deal with COVID by leaving open air seating. It does change the scope of the project quite a bit because it's now only seasonal, whereas I think originally it was supposed to be a all year round. But the one big question I have is the heating and cooling costs of $18,000 that they're requesting the full amount for DRI funds. Now it's going to be a seasonal project. Is that cost going to go down dramatically since it won't need to be heated over the winter? I don't know.
That's a good question. We can reach out to the project sponsor on that.
I guess one thing Maggie's point brings up to me too is, have you as consultants or whoever, I guess, gone back to any of these project sponsors and asked them if they want? I mean, the Sandstone has made updates specifically related to COVID, but have any of the other project sponsors sort of had the opportunity or been encouraged to modify or kind of enhance their proposals in relation to COVID? And would that potentially be something that we would want to encourage?
So short answer, Lee, yes. We have reached out to each individual project sponsor. Number one, to confirm that they wanted to continue in this process and continue to be considered for DRI funding. And then part two of that is, do they have any project updates or scope changes that they wish to include as part of that evaluation if they wanted to move forward. Quite honestly, this is really the only one that has specifically addressed where the scope has been specifically changed and modified as a result of COVID. All the others have confirmed that they wish to move forward. I think there has to, if I could speak frankly, I think that there has been some apprehension from some of the private project sponsors because there are a lot of unknowns, potentially moving forward from an economic standpoint. But at this point, those that are on the list have indicated and confirmed that they do wish to proceed.
And I just wanted to mention that, Lee, that the state does encourage that the challenges this year with the COVID-19 pandemic be included in the strategic investment plan and any project profile that the business does, mention that the business is considering that. So we would like to see that because this is such a different year and different climate.
Mm-hmm.
Fred, in your professional opinion, in all the years you worked in the village, would you ever recommend a downtown business ever winterizing their building for the winter and not paying heat to keep their water running in some fashion?
That's a tough question, Rob. I can't think of any businesses other than Scoops that have closed down on a seasonal basis. I think that they're really the only one. I think they're the only one.
I would assume that the water for the apartment building behind it is directly linked to the restaurant in some way. Dwayne's on the call. I don't know if Dwayne can answer that, but probably would need some sort of heating to at least keep it sub 45.
No, I'm on the call. I'm just not sure if I'm allowed to address directly any questions.
I think, and if our state partners are comfortable, Dwayne, if you could clarify any factual information, but not provide any anything else, I think that would be okay. Barbara, would that be okay if Dwayne could provide some factual clarification?
Yeah, it sticks to the facts. That's fine.
Dwayne?
So the question again?
I think the question was whether or not the need for, and I'm taking a look at your budget right now, the $18,000 for the heating and cooling budget item, which is included as part of the DRI request, if that is still necessary at that dollar amount, since the scope of the project has shifted to all the exterior and the outdoor seating improvements.
Well, if it was to be adjusted, the fact of the matter remains is that the cooling is actually a bigger issue for that building than the heating. The heating, there's a very good boiler there already that, the long and short of it is it might be tweaked down somewhat, but it would still need a rooftop air conditioner to support all the equipment that would be running in that small 700 square feet.
Okay, even on the seasonal basis, that's what I'm hearing.
Right, because most of it was based on cooling. If you got a small spot and all those freezers and ice cream machines running, they generate a lot of heat. And then if I start cooking things, it'd be, as an example, on one of the hot days when the air conditioner busted last year, it was 15,000 BTUs. I had to close because it got to be 102 in there.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Other questions or comments about the sandstone?
At just over 1% of the DRI, I think we should move it on.
Okay.
I will obviously abstain.
Thank you, Dwayne. Okay, hearing no opposition to that at this point, we'll mark that as continuing on and move to the Roxy Theater alterations. So this is probably, I will say, one of the lowest DRI requests I've seen in the last 4 rounds for a project that's currently being considered for DRI. The DRI request is at $58,000 for this effort. Comments, thoughts, discussions about this particular project?
I say it should go on.
Looks good.
Okay. Other thoughts, comments about the Roxy Theater?
There you go.
Okay. All right, I'm hearing continue on, so we will mark that as continuing on. Next up, the 59 Market Street. This is McDuff's. Both exterior and interior improvements. The DRI request is at $203,000 at this point in time. Thoughts, comments, discussion about this project?
I like the fact that it's making improvements to the building itself, the historic building itself, and making it a handicap accessible space.
I agree with Rose.
I also think it's worth including because of its sort of being part of that node on the northern end of downtown. And it seems like kind of focusing investment in that area could be really, really productive.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on this one? Okay, it sounds like there's consensus to keep this on the list. So we will mark that as being recommended for DRI funding at this point. Next up, the upgrades to the Clarkson Inn for a DRI request of $600,000. Thoughts, comments, and discussion?
The thing with this one for me is that the ask, the leveraging is a lot. I mean, the DRI request in relation to what they're going to invest is, is much less than a lot of the other requests. So I you know, I think it's nice having a hotel right in the middle of downtown, and they're willing to put that kind of money into it. And this request is not, you know, the percentage is not, I don't know what percentage it is. Maybe, is it a quarter? I don't do the math.
Yeah, Rose, the request for DRI funding is 24% of the total project cost, and that's a good point. That is the lowest percentage of DRI request of all projects that are on this list.
Mm-hmm.
It's an icon of downtown Potsdam.
Other thoughts, comments? Okay, it sounds like this is going to be continue to be included in the list of projects for DRI recommendation. So next up is the North Country Art Center with a DRI request of $979,000. Thoughts, comments, or discussions?
I'm going to say that I think it's something our community needs. The scope of this project and the diverse aspects it brings in. I remember for a while when the North Country Arts Council was in one of the downtown storefronts, and we had Creative Spirit. We had like actually 2 art centers in our small community. And I think we need to have a place where local artists can sell their wares, and a place that supports the arts in our community, because it's pretty vital for our community.
And not to be a broken record, but sort of geographically speaking, I think it fits into the Riverwalk and other aspects of this DRI. So for that reason alone, I think it would be worth strongly considering, along with everything Rose just said.
I echo Lee exactly. I think it's a great location for great activity in the community.
Other thoughts, comments, or discussion points? Okay, hearing none. We'll mark this as continuing on the list for DRI recommended funding. So that brings us to the end of the initial list for DRI recommended funding. We'd like to talk about those 2 additional projects that the last time you spoke together, you had identified as needing more information. We'll start first with the Market Square Mall, which now has a DRI request of $311,000. Thoughts, comments, discussion?
I'd like to move it up. If we're going to do this Riverwalk investment, we need to put something on the building to make it really fit in with what's going on. I think it's really we're a low ask for a real improvement that needs to be made in that location.
I agree with Eric.
I agree also. It's one of the first buildings you see when you're on Sandstone Drive, and I think that would be a real asset to perk up that area.
I was going to just add that improvements to the outside of that building could attract people, you know, more businesses to be in that building. So I think it would be a good thing.
Yeah, my only comment would be that, you know, if this had come in earlier, I think it could have been an even bigger ask and a potentially more transformative project. But at this point, I think it's probably the best that it can be for now. And I would strongly encourage us to move it up.
I'd just like to point out one thing. A lot of the people we turned down had fixing their roof involved, and part of this is fixing the roof. Just would like to point that out. I'm all for it, but we did turn down a lot of other proposals because they involved fixing a roof, and we felt they should fix that on their own. Just throwing it out there.
Rob, yeah, that's a good point, Rob. I think one distinction maybe to consider is that there has been an ownership change for this, and the new owner is looking to do some significant upgrades, and I think the scale of those upgrades might be a little different than some of the other projects, but that is a good point to bring up.
And I'm good with it. I just want to bring that up.
Sure.
I would. No, on this one.
Go ahead, Maggie. I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say I agree, and I did just pull up the budget. Their roofing is $10,000 approximately. So well, I guess they have a sign tower roofing, but it's also a small amount. So it's a very small portion of the budget. And all in all, I think that I can see that roof from the bypass anyway. So it's what's it called, the river walk. So it'll be beneficial for the whole project, for all the projects near it.
I would just add, it'd be nice to see a little bit more about that tower and some of those features, and maybe encourage collaboration or at least communication between the village and the owner of that building to try and make sure that there is, I forget the language that the fellow was talking about, but sort of design elements and things like that, just continuity with the Riverwalk and stuff.
Sure. Lee, I think to that point, if this project does continue on, and we have done this for other DRI communities and other projects, is kind of identify as part of that project profile that does get included in the strategic investment plan for each project that is recommended for DRI funding, that coordination occur. And in fact, there would need to be approvals through the village for building permits and that sort of thing for them to move forward. And so we could, if this project continues, we could certainly identify that within the project profile in terms of coordination for next steps. So it sounds like there's consensus to move the Market Square Mall onto the list of DRI recommended projects. Okay, so we'll move that. Next up, the Damon Hall renovations. This DRI request is at $1.65 million. Are there thoughts or discussion about this project?
I'll say something. Somebody else to go first. First, I have to say very honestly, I wasn't sure I supported this one, but the ask of this one compared to the other Clarkson asks, they're investing much more than, like, it's a well leveraged ask, and I do think that part of the criteria we had going into this is something that could bring jobs to the community. And by providing this kind of new incubator space, and you had just said, Jackie, that maybe 50 jobs are linked to this this building. I mean, I've changed my view of it, and I'm willing to move it up. But again, I'm linking it to possibly decreasing in the ask for the Whitewater Park to maybe be like 30% of that, and acknowledging that the rest could come from a different funding source. I do support the Whitewater Park. I didn't want that misunderstood. I support that whole idea, but maybe that would make the whole thing look better, the whole ask. But I'm done.
I would say this is the one project to me that feels like kind of an odd one out compared to the rest, which doesn't mean it shouldn't be included. It just feels kind of very different than most of the other projects that we've talked about. But I think Rose's point about jobs and economic activity is not to be taken lightly.
One of the things that I would tell you, having looked at a lot of the other DRI applications that are out there and having some knowledge of what's happening in other communities in the North Country, Potsdam is really pretty fortunate to have. It's a knowledge-based industry cluster on that downtown campus. So you have companies like LC drives. You have companies like DMAX Plasma or the wind turbine company that, they're coming out of research that's been developed either at Clarkson or, by people that have an affiliation with Clarkson. And it's really very unique. So in a lot of ways, Lee, you're right. It is kind of the odd man out, only because we don't think of downtowns typically as being a center for manufacturing. And frankly, they always have been and are. So.
Okay.
And they're bursting at the seams at their downtown campus. They've got, a couple of businesses that are expanding pretty rapidly, and they've actually moved in to Old Main.
I would support moving this up.
So Fred, the $1 million question is, what numbers can the Whitewater Park drop to in your mind by cutting certain things and still being able to get a start? Like in a retail world, I look at 2.6 million, I drop it to 1.9 million, makes me feel a whole lot better. That 1.999 sounds way better than 2 million. But in your mind, like, do you have numbers that you can tell us?
I mean, I'd have to go back and take a look at there were 2 phases that we proposed for in the neighborhood of about 1.7, as I recollect. Just doing the math that Barbara and I discussed, we could drop it down to 1.9.
I think the one thing that I would just throw out there for consideration is, if this were to be phased, and the fact, it could be phased, but it's not necessarily the most practical approach, primarily because of the permitting. Ultimately, you'd want to design the full project and get the permitting requirements based on that from a cost effectiveness. But if you were to phase that out, just keep in mind it might increase the overall project cost over the long term. But with that said, there are other funding opportunities to help help with that. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you all to think about.
I like going back to Barbara's comment that, that it could be positive for our request if we acknowledge that there is this other funding source that could match, 75% of this. If DRI covered 25% of it, it just acknowledges that we know that exists and that they could work in partnership, those 2 funding sources. Or do you think, Fred or Jackie, it diminishes our possibility of getting the Whitewater Park?
Jackie, do you want to take that one?
Well, I don't have an answer for that last question, Rose. I think that just taking a step back and thinking about, competitive grant programs, any project that rises to the level of being recommended for DRI funding, I think the state is going to recognize that that's a pretty significant and important project across all programs, right? Even beyond the DRI. So I think it certainly helps from the competitive aspect of other grant funding applications. It does not guarantee that, for example, if there were to be a grant application for the LWRP program as part of the match for the DRI, I think it certainly would probably add points to the overall process for you, but I'm not sure that it would guarantee that. I don't think that it does any harm in any way for that. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, Rose, at all.
And also, we do look at project viability. So if you cut it down too much, we'll ask that question, well, is that, or, when we're doing, taking your 15 million ask and trying to put it into that 9.7 box, we repeatedly ask the question, is this going to hurt the viability of that project? So you don't want to cut it down too much, because we will ask that question.
So I guess the question to the whole group is, if we move the 15.8 forward, which is within the range of what the state asks, right? It's up to 16 million. I mean, we're leaving it to the state to make all the decisions about which of these we really think are the most important. By leaving something on the other list, we make that decision. I don't know. I mean, obviously a lot's got to get cut. 6 million will have to be cut from this. So where could that possibly be?
That's absolutely true, Rose. Yeah. You make hard decisions now or we make them later.
Exactly.
I get one thing that I just was thinking, and I mean, I know the Damon Hall project is already fairly well leveraged, but you know, we're talking about other sources of funding. That also seems like a case where there have to be some other sources of funding for some of that too. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be part of the DRI, but it strikes me that, you know, that kind of a project could have some other.
Stay on that list, on the strategic list.
So let me ask, Patrick, are you still on the call?
Fred, I'm here. I'm struggling to unmute myself. Yes, I'm on the call.
You've done it. Good job.
Thank you.
So I'm just wondering, can you give us any information about where Clarkson got the funding to do the first two phases for the ground floor and the second floor?
If you give me a moment, I can probably get you better information, but I believe there was a River Valley grant award. I'll look at what the other funding sources were. I want to say National Grid was involved, and I think ESD, but let me check on that.
Okay.
So the question about, you know, while I'm looking that up, somebody had mentioned the North Country Children's Museum. I'll point out the River Valley Agency provided them $75,000, and the Northern New York Power Proceeds Program, I believe, $140,000. I had looked that up while you were talking earlier. Let me find. Give me a second, and I'll find the sources as I understand them.
I got a message from someone who's listening in. If I could just help ease this, if that would help at all. But the combination of grants, RVRDA, that's the River Valley Redevelopment, CFA, BRC, I don't remember what that stands for, Power Proceeds, private Clarkson funds, and IDA.
So Fred, is your question, you know, are those other funding sources that the Damon Hall project could tap into to complete the project?
Yes.
Okay.
Barbara, can I ask you a question you might not be able to answer, but has the state given you any indication that they are going to treat our DRI requests like all the others, or will they allow COVID to change their thoughts on how they fund us?
I guess I don't totally understand your question.
Well, the other DRIs, when they were doing this, there was no COVID. We're going through this now with COVID. Are they going to look at us pretending COVID doesn't exist, or are they going to take that into account when they look down through all of our lists? Like anything that involves public spaces, lots of people, colleges, students, are they going to take that into consideration?
In terms of the hardship, I guess I'm not sure what
in terms
angle.
of the hardship, in terms of the fact that somebody like Dwayne at the Sandstone, and I mean nothing against Dwayne, but what if he can't open again because the state shuts down your restaurants for the next year? Like, there's a lot of what ifs on our board. There's a lot of things going on at grocery stores. What if the co-op can only allow so many people to shop at a certain time? What if they decide not to move because they want to stay put to see how things, pan out. There's just a lot of what ifs. Is the state going to take that into consideration, or pretend it doesn't exist and fund the DRI the way they've always, funded it? I just didn't know if they've given you any kind of nod as to what their thoughts are.
I'm not sure the answer to that question. I just do know what I said earlier, that if you take the other side of the coin and emphasize the businesses in your DRI strategic investment plan that are addressing this by including it in their budget, then that's something that we would like to see. What you just mentioned, I'm not sure if that will be done or not. It hasn't been discussed yet, so.
The other thing to consider, though, within the same topic, is that the access to grants right now is very limited. So there aren't that many funds a lot of those grant opportunities that I just listed in regards to the Clarkson, those are not they're very inactive right now. So if we want anything to happen, we have to consider the long-term future, right? And a lot of these things are not going to be able to be funded in other ways at all.
I guess as part of the answer to the previous question is the financial viability is the capacity of the sponsor, and the financial viabilities is something that the state agencies look really hard at. So to make sure that the state's money is going to be used wisely. So whether or not we have COVID, I think the financials and each of our agencies has a little bit different requirements for when we go to contracting. But we're talking about the project selection now. So, we look at that really closely.
Right, exactly. And the hope for future grants or to identify future funding is not as it's clearly not as secure as funding that's already in hand. So projects that depend upon hypothetical future funding that they don't currently have, they may not do as well as projects that do have funding and financing, and have identified where that financing is coming from and how it's going to help pay for the project.
Thank you, Steve.
And Fred, to answer your question initially, National Grid, the Northern Border Regional Commission, NYSERDA, Clarkson, and the River Valley Agency were all part of the original Damon Hall project. And I would defer to the state level partners, but I would, in the time like right now, making any kind of confident guess about what projects do or don't have other funding opportunities, I think right now it's really hard to speculate with any confidence or certainty that any one of these projects could potentially have alternate funding options, but they also could have limited other funding options. It's very hard, I think, to look at a range of 16 or 17 projects, many of which are similar in nature and similar in purpose and have their own strengths and are in many ways appealing. There's always going to be different ways you can assemble funding potentially. And as was just mentioned, with the world as it is right now, it's certainly probably not easier than it ever has been before. But for the group to be able to really, with any confidence, prioritize who's got a better shot at other funding out there, I think it's a good effort and a good exercise, but I wouldn't have any overconfidence that any of us know what the funding streams are for some of the alternate funding streams might be. You know, Steve has his programs, Department of State has programs. You know, people have access to banks and regional loan funds, and you know, Potsdam has a loan fund. We have funding sources, all different than a DRI grant, but there are always, you know, there's other options anybody can look at. Whether those options are as appealing or are as viable or are as likely is really hard to tell right now, or just how plentiful they'll be.
I think building on that a little bit, Patrick, thank you for that. I think that's one of the reasons why when we're looking at this overall DRI request with you right now, and I'm going to run through some numbers with you. We've been kind of crunching some numbers here that might help your discussion. I think it's why, you know, that range of DRI requests, the state has always asked for DRI communities to provide a range because some projects fall off, some scopes change. I think that's even more important this round than ever because of those unknowns, whether it's grant funding, whether it's the ability of project sponsors to be able to advance given where they might be from an economic standpoint. So I do think that it is important, you know, to make sure that DRI request is within that range, but also, you know, can account for the fact that there might be some projects that don't advance because, you know, in you know, 2 months' time, their economic and financial situation might change, but it's hard to predict that right now. I'd like to offer some numbers for the LPC based on some of the discussions that we have been hearing from you with some potential modification to the DRI request, just so you have a sense of where you might be based on our discussions so far. All right, so if we were to take this current project list, include the additional $150,000 for the rebuild downtown Potsdam, and include Market Square Mall, and reduce the Whitewater Park to 1.9 million, your total DRI request is at approximately 13.6. Oh, because we're reducing that. Yeah, it's at 13.6 million. Okay. It's one scenario. If we were to take all of that and include Damon Hall at its full 1.6, that would bring the total DRI request to 15.3 million. If you were to take the current project list with the Whitewater Park at its full request right now, the rebuild downtown Potsdam at the $750,000, Market Square Mall and Damon Hall at its full request, you would be at 15.9 million in DRI request. All right, so we just wanted to throw out some of those numbers. I guess the bottom line is, if you were to include everything as it's on this list right now, at the full amount, you would still be within that $12 to $16 million range. However, to Rose's point earlier, there certainly will need to be projects or there will be projects that just don't advance because the state will need to identify $9.7 million worth of DRI projects. So there is that to consider. So
And
I just threw a lot of numbers, but thoughts?
My thought, and this is just a personal thought, but it would be, I would prefer that we propose a lower number to the state, just because I feel like we've been doing a lot of work on this, and have kind of found projects that in general, I feel like there's a surprising amount of consent and enthusiasm about, or sorry, that's not the word, but yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I guess I would hate to to sort of throw such a big number at the state and then have projects that we'd really worked on and felt like were really valuable get cut from, you know, from a couple hundred miles away when we felt like we knew they were important. That being said, you know, there needs to be that flex, but, you know, $10 million in cutting could be a big chunk of projects that we thought were like central. And that does worry me a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it would be foolish of us. Of course, we want $16 million to do all of these things. I want all of them on the list and all the other ones, and I want them all to get funded and yay. But it's not going to happen. So do we want, as a community, as a local planning committee, to make a decision more fine-tuned for the state, or do we want the state to make those decisions for us? I definitely agree with Lee that we as the local planning committee should drill it down further and make those decisions so that we don't get quite as much cut by the state.
I have a question. The state asks us to come up with what, 15 million or so? If we drill it down farther, is that an issue?
And Cindy, the range provided by the state is $12 to $16 million worth of projects. So they want projects in excess of 9.7 million to accommodate for any sort of scope changes, those that might fall off for other, you know, reasons. But as long as you're within that $12 to $16 million range, I don't anticipate that being an issue. And I'm sure Barbara, Leslie, and Steve would correct me if I was wrong with that.
Well, I'd rather send closer to 12, as Lee and Maggie talked about, than 16. And I think if it meant cutting the Whitewater Park, because I think the Whitewater Park goes along with our Riverwalk Trail and downtown, the focus on downtown, and I think Damon Hall is very important. But again, I think it is a little bit of the odd man out if you look at what we are proposing up in the upper part. So therefore, I don't know that I would want to support moving that up.
I agree with Cindy. I think I still would like to move Market. I think we talked about moving Market Square Mall up, but then just leave the list as it is.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rose, on that. But I think I'm not, as much as I think Damon Hall is important, I just don't think it fits in with everything else that we've worked and chosen, you know, to work on the immediate downtown area. That's just my thoughts.
This is one thing I want to bring up, and again, sensitive to it. I just want to think about what we put in when we did the DRI ask to begin with their proposal. You know, one of the things there were a lot of projects in there that we have no longer have on a list, and that were in the original thing, the theater being one. And I know we talked last time about, you know, do we add the theater in here? And you said, well, there's not any more room for it. And I'm kind of with you. But that was, you know, thought of when we did our DRI proposal was, you know, one of the things that was we thought was going to make it successful was having a theater in there. That's no longer on our list. So, and I'm not advocating for adding the theater, and I'm not advocating for any particular project, but I think back to Damon Hall specifically, and again, fully divulging Clarkson, that, you know, that was one of those projects on that list that, if, you know, falls off, it falls off. That's a decision. I'm not saying for or against, but we should reflect a little bit about, you know, what we went in to before we even did a call for projects that were part of what we put in for our proposal that got us to winning DRI proposal to begin with.
So other discussions or thoughts? I think that we have consensus on, you know, all but 2 projects, if I were to throw this out there, and I think it's what level to fund, what level the DRI request should be at for the Whitewater Park. I'm sensing from the discussion something lower than that DRI request, and I think if there's a number that you are comfortable with, 1.9 million has been thrown out there. We can work with the village between now and our next LPC meeting to determine what could be accomplished for that dollar figure, and kind of map that out. Because we want to make sure, back to Barbara's comment about project viability, that the project can be done with that, should there be other funding sources that can be leveraged. So that's number 1. And before moving on, I'd like to maybe get some resolution on where the committee is, where the LPC is for that Whitewater Park and that reduced amount that you would like to ultimately at this point propose as part of the slate of projects for the public to weigh in on.
Quick question. So DRI request, let's say it comes in at 15 million on the dot. Common theme from the state, is it to reduce multiple projects by a percentage, or do they literally go through and start cutting out bigger projects to get down to 9.7? What's a common theme from people from the state that you've seen in past DRIs?
I don't think I don't think there's a common theme. We
Okay.
have a set of evaluation criteria that we use, similar to what you used, but especially heavy on the capacity of the sponsor. We evaluate each project separately using those evaluation criteria, and it isn't any cut across the board. It's every single project evaluated. We go through all the information the consultants and the project sponsors have compiled. We go back into those folders and look at all the information. So
That's a good answer. No, I think like looking at, let's say, the North Country Arts Center, everybody thought that's a great idea. The state may say not a great idea and just cut the whole thing. I mean, it's not a common thing to just go down through and say, let's take 10% here, 10% here. They just literally look at every project. Okay.
No,
That
it's
makes
not
sense.
arbitrary. It's very reasoned decisions.
Okay.
And that's where Damon Hall, as valuable as it is, does worry me a little bit. I feel like it will be very obviously viable from the state's perspective. It's backed by a very strong institution, which doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. I just mean if we put it in there, I would be surprised if the state were to say that doesn't seem viable. And so that just feels like something we should consider.
So if I may go back to the question that you were asking, Jacqueline, in terms of the Whitewater Park. I think what we've heard a couple times over now is the catalytical aspect of that Whitewater Park is the permitting and design. So I think at a minimum, we ought to be doing the permitting and the design. I don't know what that number is. I highly doubt it's $1.9 million. Fred had said for 2 phases, $1.7 million. I don't know what that is, but I think we have to do that at a minimum for Whitewater Park. We've got to be able to get the permitting done, because that's the catalytical aspect. And this is all about being catalytical here of that project. So I think if we can figure out what that number is, that would be a better way to get to the answer than saying, hey, arbitrarily, we think it's 1.9 or 1.7 or whatever it is. I think we need to have some basis for which to put that number on there. And I think that at a minimum, if not some sort of initial aspects of earth moving or some sort of work that would be done in the river, that's part of that. I don't know, but I think we'd like to tie number to scope and then see what the scope is.
So Jackie, I know we have to make final decisions. I don't think we're saying eliminate Whitewater Park, but can we look at what that number can be to still be viable? And then I recommend just moving Market Square Mall up and not including Damon Hall. And can we just kind of get consensus on the whole group on that idea? Or, I mean, I don't how, I'm only hearing certain voices, so I don't know what everybody's thinking.
I'll answer your first question, Rose. I think what we're hoping for as an end product, if you will, of this discussion is a list within that 12 to $16 million range that can be shared with the public over the course of that public engagement. What will occur at the September meeting is we will have this discussion again to confirm the DRI request for each project that's there. You'll take into consideration the public feedback that we've gotten from the projects. And at that point in time, if in fact there's a dollar figure that you would like to have modified for the DRI request, it can certainly be, that is the final, right? This continues to be a draft slate of projects. So what you could do instead of picking, just a number out of the air, for example, for the St. Lawrence Whitewater Park, you could continue to keep it at 2.6. We can work over this the next few days and identify a realistic reduction that would still allow for the project viability, and we can take a look at that to see what that might be, and then have that information available for the LPC to be considering leading up to your last meeting. Okay. So that's one thing we can do.
Rose, I want to agree with you, Rose. I think we should fine tune the Whitewater. I think we should move Market Square up, and I think we should fine tune Damon Hall and move it forward with a different ask. That's my one tweak to your
Lower the number.
lower the number, but maybe move it up. That would be my update to what you just said to move things along right now.
So Rob, what we can do, similar to going back with the Whitewater Park and working on that with the village, we can go back to the Damon Hall sponsor, ask them what is the minimum amount of DRI requests that they need to advance this project, and that might involve reducing the scope of the project overall, but to be able to still have a viable project. So we can, between now and when we're next together at the next LPC meeting, work on that, if that's the direction of the LPC.
So if we move it up now, we can still change our mind. Like if that number isn't what we want, and taking Lee's comments into consideration as well, when you present it to the public, you'd have to present it either it's on the list or off the list.
Correct.
So the point now is to decide what you want to present to the public. Mm-hmm. And then the numbers could be tweaked later, based on what you hear from the public. And if you hear from the public that there's overwhelming support for something, that could be tweaked at the end too. But right now, it's what you want to present during that week when people are going to be able to look at all the projects.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying, Barbara, too, is if we presented it and then maybe we hear overwhelmingly that one of these is like, what are you talking about? Or doesn't have a lot of support, we can decide to, okay, maybe we will take it off. Right?
I mean, to be honest, I would be a little worried about presenting projects that we aren't ready to forward. I mean, if we're going to kind of put it out there to the public, it feels like we're saying this is it. I don't know. The sort of the brutal part of me wants to say we should just cut this down right now so that just so we're closer to 12, even if it hurts. But I don't think there's a consensus on that. I don't know.
I think it'd be better to use the public's comments to really dictate what we do than cut. If people are like, ew, a river walk, that would be terrible, which is obviously, like, to me, obviously not going to happen. But like, if that were to happen, then we can just be like, nope, we're going to just not do that then and take it off at the next meeting. Is that correct?
You would have that option, certainly.
I have a question regarding the public input. The DRIs previous to this, have the public ever came out and said absolutely not, remove that?
in previous DRIs, it's not necessarily, and it's the way that we ask for the input, but it's not necessarily, no, don't do that, although once in a while there are some comments like that, some strong feelings, but it's really a level of support. If there is, low level of support versus high level of support. So that's really kind of the discussion. And in your LPC Dropbox are draft project profiles for all of these projects that do identify the level of support that has previously been provided through public input, primarily at the public meeting, the public workshop number 2. So that's another source of that. But Lee, to your point, I think this committee is in a difficult position to make difficult decisions right now. And you certainly can cut this list down right now, or at your next committee meeting, your next LPC meeting, if that's the desire of the LPC. I think just taking a quick look, if you were to leave everything on this list as is, you are right at $15.9 million. If you were to leave everything as is, right? If you were to, as a reminder, if you were to have everything included on this list with the increased Potsdam, rebuild Potsdam, and just the Market Square Mall with the Whitewater Park as is, you would be at 14.3 million. To give you an idea.
And if we just took the Whitewater Park out completely, we would still be over 12.
Let's do this quick math. So it would be that and minus.
Yeah, minus 2.6.
Yeah, so you'd be right at about 12. Yeah,
you'd be a little under 12. You'd be under 12 million.
I think I like the proposal Rob put out on the table. Let's have the project sponsors for the Whitewater Park and the Damon Hall renovations give us a revised number. Put these out to the public for what Maggie was saying. Let them have a chop at it, and then we make a decision in September.
Be a lot easier in September. Yeah.
That's what we've got to do. I think we need some more information, both from project sponsors and the public. I think we have to do that.
So my question for this group is, what do you want to present to the public? So a week from Friday, the public engagement, the week-long public engagement session begins. And so my question for you is, do we present all of this as is right now with the current DRI requests for the public, or between now and well, honestly, it'd have to be between now and Tuesday for us to be able to get all the print. Do you want us to try and get those numbers modified with the project sponsors?
I think you should put it out at the total amount, all 15 projects, and all out to the public personally.
It's not gonna matter if you adjust those two numbers. The public will say what they say.
Okay.
They don't care so much about the numbers, they care about the content of the project.
Yeah, who's behind it, right?
Okay. I'm seeing head nods and thumbs up. Consensus. So let me reiterate. Believe there is consensus that this full list here with all of these projects, including the Market Square Mall, Damon Hall renovations, are continuing on as a draft slate of proposed DRI projects. Is that accurate?
And with the 750 for the rebuild downtown Potsdam?
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Okay. So this is the slate that we will prepare to present to the public. And we are almost in the home stretch for this evening. Thank you all for your patience. The one last thing, this is something that we can confirm again in September, but this is the current list of projects that you have identified for just for inclusion in the strategic investment plan. Any changes to this list at this point?
Right, hasn't the bagelry already happened? The renovation to the bagelry has happened.
Yes, it has.
Take that off.
It has.
Yes.
Okay, so that comes off. See, it's a good thing we are talking about this.
It's very nice.
Okay. Any other changes to this? Okay. So next steps, here we are, home stretch for marathon Zoom meeting. Just a reminder, this list of projects that we have just discussed will be presented to the public through multiple formats and platforms beginning August 28th and extending 1 week through September 4th. So there will be an online project gallery accessible at potsdamdri.com. There will also be storefront posters at the Chamber of Commerce and Jernavi during that time period. And on September 2nd at 6 p.m., there will be a live online Q&A session. It does require registration. Go to the project website at potsdamdri.com for the registration information. And then lastly, our next and what we anticipate being the last local planning committee meeting will be taking place at this point on September 9th. And that will be the meeting where this group will formally vote on a slate of projects to recommend for DRI funding.
Jackie, will these projects be presented to the public as still being considered by?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. As opposed to final.
As opposed to this is it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Other comments, questions, thoughts from the LPC? So with that, for those members of the public that might still be with us, thank you. If you have comments, you can email them to potsdamdri@mjels.com or visit the project website, potsdamdri.com, for information. I want to thank all of the members of the LPC, our state partners, for sticking with us. This has been a very, very long meeting, but I think a really great discussion. And I think that is a testament to how important these projects and this effort is to your community. So thank you for your dedication this evening. And if you have any questions as we're moving forward through this, don't hesitate to reach out to Sarah and I. We'll do our best to answer them.
Jackie?
Yeah.
This is Ron. I've been listening very carefully for the last 3+ hours. And I also would like to thank all the members of the LPC for their valuable input. I think we're all working together to make Potsdam a more vibrant and better place to live, and a very, very optimistic future. Again, thank you all for participating.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Be safe.